March 1817. While Brazil remained under Portuguese colonial rule, a revolutionary flame was about to ignite the northeast. In Recife, capital of the captaincy of Pernambuco, courageous men dared to dream the impossible, an independent republic, free from Lisbon's yoke. This is the story of the Pernambuco Revolution, Brazil's first republican attempt, an uprising that anticipated independence by 5 years and paid the highest price for freedom. To understand the Revolution of 1817, we must go back a few years. Portugal was under Napoleonic occupation, and the Portuguese royal family had fled to Brazil in 1808. Dom João VI transformed Rio de Janeiro into the empire's capital, but this change brought devastating consequences for Pernambuco. Abusive taxes were levied to sustain the court in Rio. The captaincy, one of Brazil's richest due to sugar, bled resources while its population grew poor. Governor Caetano Pinto de Miranda Montenegro represented everything Pernambucan people hated: authoritarianism, exploitation, and contempt for those born in Brazil. The conspiracy began in Recife's Masonic lodges. Priests, military officers, merchants, and intellectuals met in secret, debating Enlightenment and Republican ideas from France and the United States. Among the leaders was Domingos José Martins, a merchant who had lived in England and absorbed liberal ideals. There was also Father João Ribeiro, who would transform the pulpit into a revolutionary tribune. Captain José de Barros Lima, nicknamed the Crowned Lion, would be the revolution's military arm. And Friar Caneca, whose real name was Joaquim do Amor Divino Rabello, would become the movement's greatest intellectual symbol. March 6, 1817. The conspiracy was discovered. Brigadier Barbosa de Castro summoned the suspected captains to the Recife barracks for interrogation. What was meant to be a mass arrest became the revolution's trigger. When Barbosa tried to arrest Captain José de Barros Lima, the Crowned Lion reacted. In the confrontation, Barbosa was killed by sword strikes. There was no turning back. The revolution had begun, not as planned, but in the urgency of survival. The news spread like gunpowder through Recife's streets. It was now or never. Within hours, Recife was in the revolutionaries' hands. Troops mutinied, common people armed themselves, and the governor's palace was surrounded. Montenegro tried to resist but realized he was isolated. Without military support and with the city in rebellion, he fled to Forte do Broome. But not even there was he safe. The revolutionaries took the fort and arrested the governor. For the first time in Brazilian history, a colonial government was overthrown by the people's force. The streets exploded in celebration. Green and white flags, colors of the new republic, waved throughout the city. Immediately, a provisional government was formed. Domingos José Martins, Father João Ribeiro, José Luís de Mendonça, Domingos Teotônio Jorge, and Coronel Manuel Correia de Araújo assumed power. The first measures were revolutionary for the time: abolition of the heaviest taxes, freedom of the press, religious tolerance, and the promise of a constitution. The most radical, they declared total independence from Portugal and proclaimed the Republic of Pernambuco. Official documents were signed in the people's name, not a king's. It was a bold experiment in democracy in the colonial era. The revolution spread like wildfire. Paraíba quickly joined, deposing its governor. Rio Grande do Norte followed suit. Even Ceará, initially hesitant, was infected by revolutionary fervor. Within weeks, the entire Northeast seemed ready to free itself from Portuguese rule. Revolutionary messengers rode day and night, carrying proclamations and calling the people to fight. Priests preached from the pulpit in favor of the republic. Plantation owners armed their men. The revolution seemed unstoppable. But in Rio de Janeiro, Dom João VI, would not stand idle. News of the revolution reached the court as a shock. A republic in Brazil? This could not be tolerated. The king acted quickly and brutally. A naval squadron was sent to blockade Recife's port, cutting off supplies and communications. Loyal troops were mobilized from neighboring captaincies. Bahia, always faithful to the crown, sent thousands of soldiers. The plan was clear: isolate Pernambuco, economically strangle the revolution, and then crush the rebels with overwhelming military force. But the Republic also faced serious internal problems. The liberation of slaves, a banner for some revolutionaries, was abandoned to avoid losing support from plantation owners. This contradiction weakened the movement. Moreover, they lacked weapons, ammunition, and financial resources. The naval blockade made it impossible to receive external help. Disagreements among leaders began to emerge. Some wanted to resist to the death. Others sought to negotiate. The people, initially enthusiastic, began to feel the weight of the approaching war. In May 1817, Portuguese loyal troops began the reconquest. From the south, through Bahia, a land army advanced. From the sea, the Portuguese squadron bombarded coastal cities. The revolutionaries fought bravely, but were at a numerical and logistical disadvantage. Bloody battles were fought in Ipojuca, Seringhayam, and around Recife. With each combat, the Republicans retreated. Dozens, then hundreds of men fell. The dream of the Republic was being drowned in blood. Heroic resistance would not be enough against the Portuguese Empire's power. On May 19, 1817, after 75 days of existence, the Republic of Pernambuco fell. Royal troops entered Recife. Revolutionary leaders were hunted like animals. Some managed to flee inland, others were captured. Domingos José Martins tried to escape by ship, but was intercepted. Priests who preached revolution were dragged from their churches. The crowned lion, José de Barros Lima, was arrested after resisting to the last moment. The repression was relentless. The Portuguese crown was determined to make an example that would terrorize any future rebel. What followed was one of the darkest pages in Brazilian history. Hundreds of prisoners filled the dungeons of Recife and Salvador. Military tribunals sentenced dozens to death. In June 1817, the executions began. Domingos José Martins, the revolution's civilian leader, was hanged in Bahia. Father Miguelinho, who dreamed of a free homeland, was shot. José de Barros Lima, the crowned lion, died at the pillory. Friar Caneca managed to escape this first wave of executions, but would be captured and executed years later in 1825 in another revolutionary attempt. Portugal's message was clear: revolution meant death. The Pernambuco Revolution of 1817 lasted only 75 days, but its impact crossed the centuries. It was the first time Brazilians declared an independent republic. 5 years later, in 1822, Dom Pedro would proclaim independence, but maintaining the monarchy. The Republican dream of Pernambucan people would only be realized in 1889 with the proclamation of the Republic. But the seeds planted in 1817 never died. Each executed revolutionary became a martyr. Each drop of blood spilled fertilized the soil of freedom. Pernambuco proved that Brazilians could govern themselves. The Pernambuco Revolution was crushed, but not forgotten. It teaches us that freedom has a price, and that there are moments in history when ordinary people make extraordinary choices. In the next episode, we'll travel to the Eastern Front of World War II, to the bloodiest battle in human history, Stalingrad. Over 2 million men, 6 months of infernal urban combat, the titanic clash that decided the war's fate. Until then, history does not end. Neither does the archive. Subscribe to Front Archives and keep history alive.